But thanks for bringing that up, because I don't think too many people really understand how small the silver market is. And honestly, I am biased, but silver is critical, essential. It's an absolute. The world could survive without Bitcoin, but the world could not survive without silver.
Welcome back to Wall Street Silver. We have two great guests with us today, Mr. Benoit La Salle from Aya Gold and Silver, and Mr. David Morgan from the Morgan Report, and also Lee Justo from Wall Street Silver. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, the big news today, let me share screen here. The big news today is non-farm payrolls. It missed by a huge margin, almost 500,000 jobs. And this was the big thing, David, don't you think? The whole taper narrative that Jerome Powell and all the Fed speakers have been talking about is we have to see substantial progress in the jobs market before we're going to taper, right? That was the gist of it. That was the whole shebang. We've missed it now. I mean, is there any concept? Is taper effectively dead now?
I think it is, Jim. I think that it's all rhetoric. I'm writing finishing touches on the September issue of the Morgan Report, and not to be confrontational, but there's two things that he said from the way I heard it. And one is, as you said, this taper, but it's really monetary stability, which they always throw out there, which is kind of the inception of the Federal Reserve back in 1913. And if we've had anything but monetary stability, I know I've repeated myself 1,000 times, but it bears one more repeat. Anything that's gone from 100 cents in 1913 to about 2 cents in 2020 is not monetary stability. But you're right, Jim. I think it's all rhetoric from here on. They're going to jawbone the market. At some point, it's the boy who cried wolf, and they're going to say, we don't believe you anymore, and they'll lose even more confidence than they've already lost, which means the buyer of last resort is the Federal Reserve. So they're doing this circular motion where the United States government borrows from the private bank, and the way to cash out those long-term debt instruments is by selling them back to the same entity, the Federal Reserve.
Mr. La Salle, how do you feel about what you're hearing?
No, look, I'm in complete agreement. I think it was important news this morning. I think it's the beginning of the fall rally. But when I saw that, it's an important piece of news. But the second bullet was also that year over year, wages are up 4%. So that to me is even more dramatic. It adds power to the fact that we did not create the jobs, but we also have wage increase. Hence, there's inflation, and it's a very unique situation where you are not creating the job. There's still 6 million people looking for jobs, but you have inflation. And to me, that's the perfect storm.
Is that the definition of stagflation? I guess we need to start remembering what the definition is. That's like slow economic growth, still high inflation. Maybe is there something more technical to it?
Well, I think we've never experienced the situation we're in right now, because inflation is coming a lot from supply chain disruption because of China, because of COVID. So you have massive supply chain disruption. You have massive inflation in shipping. I don't know if you guys followed the Drew World Container Shipping Index, but
I was ready to show it. I already had that graph ready to pull up today.
And you and I didn't even talk. There you go.
Yeah.
And so one of my friend is in the business of importing from China, and the container China Canada used to be $3,000, and now it's $23,000.
Yeah.
So massive inflation coming in, not creating job, but massive adjustment needed for the salaries. So it's like, to me, it's the perfect storm of inflation, but it's not stagflation. It's inflation because of COVID and the disruption of the supply chain. Then you have not creating jobs, the government maintaining their programs. I absolutely believe that's the perfect storm for precious metal.
Well, that's I used to also import containers from China to Los Angeles and then further by train, but just the ocean freight shipping 5 or 6 years ago when I last did it was $2,400. $2,400 is what I used to pay to ship a 40-foot container from China to Los Angeles.
Yep.
It's crazy now. I mean, it's up 1,000% on some of these routes, or higher. Just out of control. But that's what you're right. It's a supply chain disruption, but there's two types of inflation, right, Mr. Morgan? I heard you talk about this on the Kaiser report recently. There's the monetary inflation and supply chain disruption, and we're like in the perfect storm of both of them, aren't we?
Exactly. I'd like to get Lee in here. He's a good thinker, and I always like to listen a little more than I talk. And I don't want to dominate. I want to get Lee in and get his thoughts on that.
One thing I'd like to add to this discussion. I talk to a lot of business owners, and they're all struggling to get employees. So we talk about like people being out of work, but it's obviously intentional. They don't want to go back, and that will drive wage inflation.
Well, that's coming up this week, right? Aren't they ending all the unemployment in most states?
Yeah, I suspect there's going to be a lag between that happening and people going back, because people are going to have to feel some pain to want to go work.
Yeah, well, we also have the eviction moratoriums that are ending in the United States by Supreme Court decision. They overruled the CDC, said you don't have that authority to actually do what you've been doing the past year and a half. But hey, no harm, no foul. But a lot of people are going to be, I don't think they're going to be making up on back rent. I think a lot of people are going to be evicted. That's the next big series of stories I think you're going to see in September, October, November. There's tons of eviction stories coming through the news. And maybe it's time to bring, they used to have something in the 70s called the misery index that we haven't heard of in many decades. And maybe
Jim, I think we'd be off the charts at this point after a year and a half of COVID, everything else going on.
Something else I wanted to share with you guys. Benoit, with all this news out today on non-farm payrolls missing, silver is up big today. I haven't seen a day like this in forever. I mean, we've been so depressed with down, 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 and now we seem to be having a bit of a breakout from this trend of the past few weeks. Silver's up over 3% right now. As a producer, you're producing almost 2 million ounces on your way to 8 million ounces in Morocco. How quickly does that impact you guys at the production level?
Well, it impacts everybody, obviously, and many producers do not sell when you see dips like 23 or 22. I mean, many producers, we just don't sell. We keep it in inventory. We have good working capital. We believe in the long-term price of silver being much higher. So when we see those dips, we can wait a month. We can, as long as you're within the quarter, you can sell whatever, you should, you're fine. So, the quarter ends at the end of September, and I can assure you most producers were not selling from beginning of August to now, and you'll see some transaction. The demand is there. The demand is extremely strong. We've talked about that. People still call us, at Beaver Creek next week when we're going there. Many traders are there trying to meet with us, trying to get some product. So the reality is companies, if you believe in the long-term price, you just don't sell on those dips. You just keep it and sell when it's a little bit higher. But with the demand getting stronger and stronger with all the industrial use, and I think that was kind of a last dip before we start seeing a very strong progression upwards.
So, David, I recently saw you on the Max Kaiser report, and you made a very interesting comparison between the fixed number of Bitcoin bars, or Bitcoin at 21 million, and silver. Could you share that with our audience?
Sure. First of all, kind of a shout out to Max and Stacy. They've been very big supporters of my work. And first time I met them was in France at their studio, and we had a great interview. And then we had a even better cup of coffee outside the studio and a long chat. And they've been big supporters of silver. Of course, Max has become a huge Bitcoin proponent for very many years now, and kudos to him. But we were talking a lot of different topics, and the Bitcoin topic came up. And of course, one of the big selling features of Bitcoin is it's a fixed amount. So unlike the Federal Reserve, where they can print money to infinity, there's a limited number of Bitcoin. But I pointed out that the amount of Bitcoin is limited to 21 million, but the silver market, let me define silver market, that's the commercial bar market, which is 1,000-ounce bars. There's only 2 million of those. So there's 2 million silver bars, commercial bars, and 10 times as many Bitcoin eventually, which is interesting because at the time I did the interview with Max, the Bitcoin was roughly twice the price of a silver bar. So one Bitcoin round numbers 50,000 USD, and one 1,000-ounce bar round numbers 25,000 USD. And then Max came back and said, yeah, but it's a fixed amount with Bitcoin and silver producing more every year. And what I didn't say then, which I'd like to say now for Wall Street Silver and all that listen, okay, Max, you're right. And I verified he was correct. But if we take the 1 billion ounces of silver that we mine and recycle, it would take 19 years without an ounce going to jewelry, silverware, investment, or industry to equal the Bitcoin. So yes, you're right, Max. You're going to produce more silver every year, but it's going to take 2 decades just of none of it being used to match the amount of Bitcoin. So I think you get my point that, and I did this before, when Bitcoin hit the $17,000 level, which was an all-time high at that time. I was at the Anarchapulco conference sponsored by Jeff Berwick. And I said, I'm pretty good at calling tops. I don't know, but I think it could be, if you got in here at 1,000 and you're at 17, you might consider swapping out some Bitcoin into silver. And one young man came up to me at the conference and said, I did just that. I am so happy. So, there's nothing sacrosanct about you have to be on one side or the other. You can have them both. You can swap between them both. I mean, there's lots of ways we can invest. I like a diversified portfolio. But thanks for bringing that up, because I don't think too many people really understand how small the silver market is. And honestly, I am biased, but silver is critical, essential. It's an absolute. The world could survive without Bitcoin, but the world could not survive without silver.
That's so true. And I think something that Max might not have, I think he probably knows it, but he brushed over it, is the amount of global mine supply peaked in 2015, 2016. It's been on a downtrend ever since. So whereas, we're consuming more and more of it gets tossed into landfills every year that we don't recycle. And global mine supply, at some point, it's declining to the point where it's going to be below industrial demand. And, we'll see what happens when someone doesn't get their silver, but that remains to be seen. Any final thoughts, Lee?
Yeah, buy silver. Now's the time before it really starts exploding.
Jim, people forget about the energy transition. You guys in New York had a crazy storm, like one in 500 years. Look at what's happening right now in Spain. It's a little bit similar to what you guys had in New York. Then you had Greece that burned down. I mean, we have to go to the energy transition, and that means more demand for silver. I mean, in the batteries, in the cars, and the solar panel, which we have to go solar. It's the cheapest source of energy right now is solar energy. So we're going solar worldwide, energy transition, and all of that just increases the demand for silver. And people don't factor that at all in the equation.
Mr. Morgan, I just also heard you on another interview. You use all these great stats when you're not on my channel, so you need to start using them on my channel. You said how much silver per year is used in the chip industry right now? And there's a
44 million ounces.
44 million ounces. That's a crazy number, and it's going up. And there's a massive chip shortage.
Right.
And as Benoit just said, the solar industry, it's all these green mandates that are coming in Europe and the United States and Canada are just going to dramatically explode the amount of solar in the coming decade. But anyways, on that, final thoughts. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you giving me some of your time, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.